Welcome back to my top 50 board games of all time. Today it's part 2. I'm currently on paternity leave in the future, so hopefully I finished filming and editing these videos before the baby came. If you really like my videos, then I would really like your support on Patreon. And as a thank you, you'll get 5 exclusive videos covering the rest of my top 100, as well as my monthly newsletter where I review games that I don't talk about on the channel. Become a patron at patreon.com/Actualol. And to see the rest of this series, it's time to get serious with yourself and subscribe to the channel. You can't expect the algorithm to lead you back here every time. It's got things to do. It's busy disenfranchising our youth. Right, let's get to the list. At number 40 is Scrawl, or Telestrations, which is basically the same game, and I have like a 50-50 combination of both of them to create what I think is like the perfect version of it. It's a party game, a drawing game, and it's one of the funniest party games that you'll play. Like, it's definitely not one that you're playing for the competition and for the points. You're just playing it to have a good time with a big group of friends. Because what happens is you're given a prompt, say for example, pickle, and then you have to draw that on the first whiteboard, and then you pass that to the next player who doesn't know what the word is, but can see that. And they have to guess what you've drawn. So then they write what they think it is on the next one. Then they pass that word or phrase to the next player who then has to draw that. The fun bit of the game is when you go back through at the end and you see the journey that everyone's whiteboards went on. That it started off with something simple like pickles and just ended up somewhere completely different. And some of the people's interpretations, but also their drawings, is just what makes the game so entertaining. And that's why I prefer Scrawl in terms of the prompts, because they get you to draw things that are way more difficult and creative, but that means that you end up with way bigger misunderstandings and confusions and just hilarity. I've tried my best to do karate chopping a frog, but this is all I'm capable of. And then, of course, the next person thinks it's stroking a frog, and then it'll end up completely different by the end of it. So you just get crazier journeys. You can still have fun with just basic telestrations, but I really prefer the Scrawl prompts. But what I like about telestrations is that it comes with these whiteboard flip books that just make the game so much easier to play, tells you what you need to do on the next round. They even have different colors for the rings, so you know which is your whiteboard. So I used to have both versions, and now I've managed to cram all the Telestrations boards into Scrawl with their prompts and created like a bastardized version. This used to be a lot higher up my top 50. It's one of my favorite party games of all time, but I just haven't had the chance to play it as much lately because I can't get those big groups together. It's best with like 8 players or more because you get a much bigger journey that the words and the drawings go on. And so therefore you get more enjoyment out of it. Playing it with smaller groups, it just doesn't have that same feel. So I would always turn to other games instead. But still a brilliant game. And if you do have that kind of huge group or family, then definitely check out Scrawl or Telestrations. And number 39 is Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers. This is my preferred version of Carcassonne because it's a bit meaner, it's a bit more dramatic, and it still retains the things that I love about Carcassonne. So this is a tile laying game where you are taking a tile on your turn and adding it to the map. You're expanding out this land of rivers and forests and fields and animals. And you have meeples that you are going to put down on spots to claim them to try and get points. In the original game, getting a road tile was often disappointing because you only get 1 point for each of them. But in this, the rivers score not just for each tile of the river, but there's fish in them. So some tiles will have more fish in than others, and they get you extra points. You also have these huts that you can place on an entire river system. So we're talking about going beyond the lakes, which are like the end points of the rivers. You get to score for every single fish in that entire river system. So that could be the entire board by the end of the game. And that encourages other players to try and piggyback off of it, to try and build a hut that's adjacent and then connect it up to your river system later so that they score those points as well. So it makes the game a lot more competitive in terms of trying to steal points from each other, which you can do in the original Carcassonne and happens occasionally. But in this, it's there's a much bigger reward for it, and so therefore you're much more likely to want to do it. The forest tiles are more interesting because if you complete one with one of these standing stones in, you get a special tile off of this stack, and all these tiles are more powerful than the original one. So this is a lake with 3 fish in, and you get to place that in addition to your tile. So it's not about the person that controls the forest, it's about the person that finishes the forest. So there's actually an incentive to finish other people's forests, which will give them points just so you can get one of these special tiles. And I like the hunting more than the farming in Carcassonne, firstly because it's just more straightforward. If you place in a field, you're connected to all the animals that are there and you're going to score points for them. But also the animals score different amounts of points. So if you're buying a woolly mammoth, that's worth 3 points, whereas the deer are only worth 1 point. And I find there's less frustrating turns in this game. In Carcassonne, you can so often get a tile that's just useless to what you're currently working on. Whereas in this, you almost always get an animal come up on every tile. So you can add that to your hunting, even if it doesn't improve your forest or your river. So there's never nothing to do. And the final rule that I really like is that you don't get any points for forests and rivers that aren't completed by the end of the game. So there's a real incentive to get them done. And you can really get stressed out by the tiles running out and knowing that you're not going to have enough time to do it. Whereas in the original Carcassonne, you get like half points. It's making the game softer, more welcoming to newbies. But I like that threat. I like the possibility that, no, I didn't get it done in time. Well, then I'm punished for it. For me, this really feels like a Carcassonne 2.0. The magic of Carcassonne is still there with the simple take a tile, place a tile, and knowing when to use your meeples and not. But there's just a few extra twists that elevate it above, and I'd always rather play this version. That's Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers. And number 38 is High Society. And this is one of my favorite small box card games from my favorite designer, Reiner Knizia. It's an auction game with an amazing twist, which is that if you have spent the most money by the end of the game, you're out. You can't win. The reason for that is you are playing as the High Society. You are bidding on luxury objects. But if you've spent the most money by the end of the game, then you're not rich anymore. You're not part of the High Society, and therefore you don't count. Every round, a card will get flipped and you'll be bidding on it until everyone passes except one, and then that person pays the money and wins that card, and it's worth points. You're trying to get the most points to win. But you're bidding with a fixed hand of cards. Everyone has the same amounts of money. So you've got like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 10, a 15. Once these cards are spent, you won't get them back again. So you can get into situations where you're having to bid more than you'd want to simply because you just don't have the right change to be able to bid what you want. Another great thing about the game are the disgrace cards. And when they come out, you're bidding to not take them because they're going to punish you. They're going to get you half the points that you currently have or lose one of the cards that you've already bought. So you're bidding to not accept that until one person takes it for free and everyone else has to put in the money that they've bid. So you're making everyone else poorer, which is great because then they're going to have less money later to be able to bid on the cards that you want. It's a game that really swings around. With every turn, you really feel like this person's winning, then this person's winning, and then it's over to them. And you're just trying to time it right to have just the right amount of points, but not spend too much when the game ends. And the game always ends in a hurry. It's such a strong, punchy idea. You can't get such a quick, brilliant game in such a tiny box as High Society. And number 37 is Spicy. This is my favorite bluffing card game. You each have a hand of cards that have got 3 types of hot things. You've got pepper, wasabi, and chili, numbers 1 to 10. And one person is going to start you off. They're going to pick a suit. They're going to play a card, 2 chili. Then you have to follow that. You have to go higher than it and play the same suit. You're playing it face down. If you don't have it, you can declare whatever you want. But if they challenge you, they're going to reveal the card. And if you're wrong, they're going to win that stack as points. But when they challenge you, they have to decide, are you lying about the number or about the suit? So they think it's not a chili. But it turns out it is. It's just the number was wrong. That means you win the stack as points. You're trying to get rid of your hand. And if you do, you get a 10-point bonus. But the game allows you to decide when to lie. Because sometimes you'll play cards and they're fine. Other times, you don't have a card that fits the suit. you can just draw off the top of the deck, add a card to your hand. It means you're much less likely to get rid of your hand, but if you get called out for cheating and they're right, you have to add 2 cards to your deck anyway. So if you know that you're about to cheat and someone's going to catch you, you don't think you can bluff it this round because you've got like 1 card left, then actually maybe it's better to just take 1 card off the top and stop them from going away with all those points. I love that it has that pure immediate bluffing of I'm playing a card and I'm telling you what it is, and I could be looking you in the eyes and lying to you, and you have to decide if I am or not. But that extra decision of am I lying about the suit or the number makes the game that bit more interesting, because they're playing a bit with deduction of what are they most likely to have. It could be likely that they have a 10, but we've played so many chilies at this point. Are they really going to have a chili left? But there's also a really interesting sort of dramatic reveal to it, which is that you know they're lying, but you don't know which bit it's about. And so there's kind of a 50-50 success of whether you're going to catch them. It evens out the game a bit because you could be not that good at bluffing, but still get away with it a few times just because they keep challenging you on the wrong type of thing. Ultimately, I'm comparing this to Skull and Cockroach Poker, which are like the definitive simple bluffing games. And Spicy is just slightly above them for me. I still love those 2 games. I have them in my collection. But Skull is just a bit fiddly to introduce to new players. Like, it takes quite a few rounds to understand the rhythm of it. There's only 1 loser in Cockroach Poker, whereas in Spicy, there's 1 winner, that you collect the most points and you win on your own. And I just find that a bit more satisfying. Bluffing is one of my favorite aspects of any game. It's interactive and social. I'm not brilliant at it. I feel like I have good days and bad days, but it's always fun for that challenge. And I really enjoy the challenge of trying to read my friends' faces and trying to grasp whether they're lying to me. And this is the purest, simplest form of that kind of game. So if I want that feeling, but I want it on a train or in a pub, then I'm going to take Spicy with me. And number 36 is K2, a game about climbing the mountain of K2. You each have 2 climbers that you're sending up as high as possible and trying to keep them alive. And that's what I love about this game, is that your characters can die. You have 2 of them, and if you don't manage their acclimatization properly, if you send them up too fast, or if the weather hits really bad, then you can just have a character die, and that's it. You're going to get no points for them. So you're trying to get the most points possible, and ideally you'd get both your characters to the peak, and that would get you 20 points. But the chances of that are pretty slim because it's a busy mountain, it's very hard to survive, and you've got other players getting in your way. The system of how you move is really simple. You have a hand of 6 cards, and you choose 3 to play every round. And some will be faster than others. Some will be good at getting you up fast, some down fast, and others are meant for acclimatization, which is tracked on your board. If you don't look after them, that's when they're going to hit the bottom, and that's how they can die. As you get further up, the conditions are so bad that it's knocking points off of them every turn. And then you've got the weather to deal with. I love this about the game, is that you have a forecast for the next 6 days. So you can see that today is sunny, it's not going to affect you, but tomorrow you're going to take 1 damage, but only at certain altitudes higher up the mountain. And then later in the week, you're going to get 2 damage. So you have to plan for that. Make sure that your acclimatization level is high enough so that you'll survive. And you use this forecast to help you time when you're going to make your ascent and pick which path you're going to take. The other thing that you have to massively factor in is where all the other climbers are, because as you get closer to the peak, the paths narrow and they can only take 1, 2, or 3 people at any one time. So you can be in a position where you're at the top, you made it and got all those points, but the other players, if they're not getting out of your way, you can't come back down. So it's really tight, especially in a 4 or 5 player game. And you can be in positions where players are basically trying to leave you to die at the top because they know that you need to come down to be able to survive, and they're not going to let you do that. And that's what I love about this game, is you have to factor in what the other players are doing. For example, every round, everyone reveals their cards and how many movement points they're going to play. And the player who plays the most has to take a risk token, which ultimately is going to be removed from their movement or from their acclimatization level. So they get punished for being the riskiest player that round. I love the decision of when you're going to make your ascent and how far you're going to ultimately go. You could win the game and not get to the peak with either of your characters because the weather was just really bad and everyone else died. There's a really fun balance of things affecting your decisions with the timing of the weather, where the other players are, and then the cards that you're getting every round. And the jeopardy of your character actually dying and that really hampering your chances of winning the game makes every decision feel that much more important. I wish I had more games like this that managed to capture their theme, be interactive and competitive with interesting decisions, and yet seem so easy to get into. It's 13 years old at this point, but there's no beating it for this theme. That's K2. And number 35 is Hollywood Golden Age, and this is another auction game from my favorite designer, Reiner Knizia. This has come under many names over the years: Traum Fabric, Dream Factory. Nowadays, in English, it's called Nightmare Productions, about horror movies, but my version is Hollywood Golden Age. So you start the game with some empty screenplays to some famous movies. So I've got here Casablanca and High Noon, and they have slots that need filling. So Casablanca needs a director, an actor, a composer. Once you've filled up the necessary spots, that's when you can release the movie and you're gonna score points for it. And the points you'll get for it depends on the star quality of the actors and directors that you've hired for it. And the way you get anyone is by winning auctions. So this car will drive around the city of Hollywood and then it will get to a new location and you will bid on all of the items at that location. The person who pays the most will win all of it and then distribute it amongst their movies as they wish. So here we've got Henry Fonda, Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, a composer that's 3 stars, and an agent that's 3 stars. The bidding is super simple. You've got a bunch of cash and you take it in turns to make a bid. But what happens with that cash when you spend it is that it goes to the other players that didn't win. So you're splitting up the money. The money always stays in the game. So at some points, you'll be really rich because you haven't bought anything in a while. But if you've just spent big, then you'll have nothing and you know that your opponents have quite a lot. So it's an interesting dynamic. It means you can't win too many auctions in a row. And I like that you're bidding on these lots. So you have to decide the value of 5 tokens, some of which you want, some of which you don't. You're not always going to get 3 stars of everything to fill up your movie, but the game is incentivizing you to hold out and make that perfect movie because there's an Oscar given at the end of every year to the best film made that year. And then at the end of the game, there's even more Oscars going to the best movie in each genre. There's also extra points for making the worst movie of the entire game, the B-movie award. So you can swing in the other direction, and that can be a fun challenge, like racing to get to the bottom against another player. I like that you can look ahead on the board and see what's going to be available later on, so you know whether to spend all your money now because that's the best it's going to get, or save it for later when you really want to bid on Cary Grant because he's exactly what you need for your movie. Another nice touch is that you have 2 Hollywood parties on the board. Those tiles are face down, you can't see what's in them. And when you get there, you flip them over and the person that gets the first pick is the person that has the most actors and stars casted in their movies currently. So it's like this Hollywood connections thing. If you're in touch with enough famous people, you're going to get into the party first and you're going to get first dibs on the best offering there. It's a really enjoyable theme to be a part of. You've all heard of these movies and these actors and casting them in roles that don't suit them. I love that they were able to go with real people and real movies because some versions of this game have just gone with like fake things because of copyright reasons. And this one just brings it alive that bit more. But it's not just about the theme. I've played a lot of other movie games that just don't hold up. Hollywood Golden Age is a great auction game that just happens to have a really pleasant theme on top of it. And number 34 is Foundations of Rome. This is one of the newer games in my top 50 and quite a surprise for me that I like this game this much because it's a huge overproduced Kickstarter game in a massive box. But unlike most overproduced Kickstarter games, this one has simple rules and really punchy gameplay. It's a city building game. You are building Rome on a shared board, and that in itself is a rarity because most city building games have you building your own city in a personal area. You're trying to buy lots that are adjacent to ones you already have so you can build bigger buildings. There's three types of buildings. Commercial is going to get you more money when you do income, so that's going to allow you to buy more stuff. Residential is going to improve the population, and there's a population track that you're trying to stay ahead of to get more points than anyone else. And then you've got civic buildings, and these are the most interesting in terms of placement because they're going to score off what they're adjacent to on the board. So you're watching as the city develops, seeing where people put their residential buildings and thinking, if I can get a spot next to that, I can piggyback off of them. They're getting points off of building a residential building, but I can get points off of them for being next to their residential building. And the bigger, the more people that are in it, the more points you'll get. It's all about spotting opportunities and getting in there before everyone else. You want to be buying the deeds so that you can build, but you also want to be building so that you've got better income, so that you're staying ahead on that population track. And of course, you want to be taking income because then you're not going to have any money to be able to buy anything. You might see the deed come up for a lot that you really need, but when it comes into the market, it's going to cost you a fortune. How long do you wait for that price to decrease before you buy it? Because someone else might jump in and get it instead of you because they know how important it is for you. It's such a great level of interaction because you can't destroy anyone's plans, but you can buy deeds that they need. And there's this constant frustration and having to adapt based on what everyone else is doing that I really love in games. It's my favorite city building game because it has those typical adjacency rules of where you want to build and making plans and trying to stick to them, but it introduces other players building in the same city of you, which is how it should be. I don't love that it's this mega overproduced thing. I'll never be able to put it into a rucksack and take it to game night, but it's such an interesting, different experience that I'm glad to have it in my collection. And number 33 is Isle of Skye. And this is a tile laying game crossed with a sort of auction game. And it's a lot more interesting than this cover and this theme would have you believe. You're each building your own personal area of the Isle of Skye. So you've got mountains and lochs and grassland, and then you've got cattle and sheep and boats and whiskey barrels. But the way you get your tiles is the most interesting thing about this game. Every round, you each draw 3 tiles out of the bag and put them in front of your shield. These tiles are now up for grabs, and you're going to set the price of them behind your shield. Then everyone reveals. So I've put this tile at 5 gold, whereas this one at 10, and this one I've axed. That's going out of the game. You have to do that with one of the 3. So other players now have the opportunity to buy one of my tiles or from in front of another player, but they have to pay my price, and they pay that price to me. So I'm setting a price hoping that they're going to pay it to make me more money. Or I'm hoping to be able to get that tile myself. If I set it high enough, then no one else will be able to afford it, or they'll think I'm charging too much. So if nobody else buys this for 10, then I will pay the 10 to the bank and I get that tile and add it to my island. I love that dynamic because you really have to understand the value of everything and see how much money other players have going into it, but also see the tiles that they're going to have available. If you put all your money down here to set the price for this tile, then you won't have any spare cash to be able to buy that really good tile over there. The reason you want some tiles more than others is because of the 4 objectives. And these change every single game, and they also change which round they score. So in the first round, you're scoring objective A, then B, then A and C, then B and D. So the timing of when you need stuff is really important. A here wants completed mountains, this one wants lots of cows, this one wants a really big lake, and this one is scoring points for sheep. So in some games, sheep and cows and mountains are really important. In another game, it's going to be lochs and whiskey barrels and lakes with boats in. Every game is completely different. Whilst the tile laying puzzle is interesting, it's really this price setting mechanism that is what I love about this game. I would love to see it in other games because it adding this element of interactivity, of worrying about what everyone else is doing in a game where you're still very much building your own thing. I played this one just the other week and I was reminded how solid and how different this game is. And number 32 is Chronicles of Crime, which is a crime-solving cooperative game where you play as detectives trying to solve a murder. The way you explore the story in this game is by using a phone app. You scan the QR codes that's on the characters' cards to interrogate them. And you can ask them about other people and things by scanning that QR code, which is what I love about this game. There's complete freedom to ask someone about anything that you've previously seen. And the game doesn't hold your hand telling you what to ask them about. You really have to realize for yourself. And it makes you feel like a proper detective, because you feel like, actually, if we ask them about the blood that we saw here, that could open up this whole thing. And sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. And when it does, it feels incredible, like you really broke through in the case. There's a little bit of text in that phone app to answer every possible question that you could ask of all of the 30 characters in that particular case. And that's why it uses a phone app, because that wouldn't be possible using an analog book. The other great thing that the app is used for is to give a 3D image of the crime scene that you can look on your phone and move around the room to spot evidence. So you'll be shouting out to the other players, oh, I can see blood in the corner, there's a broken bottle, there's some papers. And they're going through this deck of evidence cards, trying to find the things that match, so that when you're no longer looking at that VR scene, you can scan the codes of those things and see which of those is relevant evidence. Then once you've got them, if you find the right papers, you can then go back to the characters that you previously talked to and ask them about them and see what they know. So if you're not observant enough and you don't spot the right thing in the corner of that crime scene, then that's a whole range of questions that you won't be open to. I play this game exclusively with my wife. It's a really good two-player game, and I really love just discussing theories with her. And you'll start the game where you've got an idea that it's this person, and then you go on a journey, just like a classic whodunit, and it ends up being someone entirely different. And it's not just the base game I love. I've played all through the Noir expansion, which is 1950s detectives in LA. The Welcome to Redview expansion is like a Stranger Things type story. And then you've got the standalone expansions, 1900 and 1400 that I've played, and I would recommend all of that. So that is a lot of content to get through, and there's a real depth with this game, and I would say that they all hold up with each other. They're all of a really good quality. It's not my favorite crime-solving game. There are others further up this list. I don't love having to play with the app. It's a little bit clunky at times, but what it unlocks is that ability to ask any question of any character, and that's sort of completely unrivaled in any other crime-solving game. So I really like that USP of Chronicles of Crime, and absolutely this one's going to stay in my collection so that I can just continue to play all the extra content that comes out for it. And number 31 is Deep Blue. This is a push your luck game about diving for treasure. You've each got 2 boats that you're sending out to diving spots. And when you go diving, you're going to be drawing gems from the bag, hoping to find gold, silver, and rubies, and not find the hazards, the sea creatures, and the oxygen issues that mean you're going to have to resurface and stop getting any more treasure. It's classic push your luck. You keep twisting until you either stick and go home with what you've got, or you go bust. But the twist that I love about this game is that you're pushing your luck collectively. You might go diving with 3 or 4 other players, but one of you is the leader. They have this diving bell, and only they are drawing from the bag and deciding when you stop. So they might push their luck too far, and that means that none of you end up with anything. Except not every diver is equal. You can always take one hazard of either color and not go bust, but the second one means you will, unless you have a card to protect yourself. And some divers will have these cards and others won't. So the leader might end up being able to stay down longer than everyone else, whereas the others will have to resurface. There are also cards that will score you more points for certain gems. If you draw a purple card and you have this crew member, that's going to get you 5 points because they're a specialist in that type of artifact. But if someone else who doesn't have that card draws it, it's useless to them. They get nothing. So it gives you an incentive to keep pushing your luck to get certain gems, but that might not be the interest of the other people that are on the dive. And if you get to the dive site early, you can pick one of the scouting spots that's going to give you a massive advantage. So if you scout for rubies, if a red gem comes out, you're going to get 10 points for it if you scout on that spot. It means that everyone has different reasons to stick or twist at different times, and everyone's watching the gems being drawn out, having completely different reactions to what's happening. Some are begging the leader to stop so that they survive and at least get something, whereas others are encouraging the leader to keep going because they know that they'll be safe, but they want to screw over the other players who they want to get nothing out of this dive. And that's what I love about this game. There's such a communal atmosphere to the push your luck that everyone is invested in it. I really like the card system in this game because when you play a crew member, it then goes into your bunk. You can't use it again until you do a rest action, which is where you spend your whole turn to shuffle up the cards that you've used and get 3 of them back. But when do you do it? Because if somebody's just about to go and dive far away, you want to use a card to move there to get to that dive spot. But if you don't have your good high scoring cards in your hand when you go diving, then you're barely going to make any points out of it, so it's a waste of time anyway. So you're really trying to balance getting new crew members that's going to get you lots of points, making sure that you're at the dive spot so that people don't dive without you, and resting so that you've got your good crew members back in your hand for when you're about to dive. I'm amazed that this game didn't do better. I think that people just hate giving over control of that push your luck to another player, but for me, there's a real excitement in it. You don't have to go on a dive with someone else, but it's usually going to benefit you, and you can protect yourself by having the right crew members. When you get the turn to be in charge, it feels so much more powerful because you're not just controlling your own destiny, but everyone else's as well. It's the same team as Heat Pedal to the Metal that absolutely blew up recently. And for me, they're very similar. It's light rules, innovative mechanisms, and really entertaining gameplay. I played this one just the other week and was reminded how much I love it. That's Deep Blue. Those are my favorite games of all time, numbers 40 to 31. If you'd like to buy any of them, there are links in the description below. And to see the rest of this series, please subscribe to the channel. I'm John Perkis, thanks for watching.